Hey, Diana from the Dianaverse here, and I am going to do the forecast for the full moon in Taurus, lunar eclipse, very dramatic full moon we're going to have here on either, however you look at it, very early Tuesday or very late Monday. So happy birthday to the Scorpios who still have birthdays coming up. Are you ready to rumble? Here we go. Full moon is always opposite the sun, right? That's what a full moon is. We're seeing the entire face of the moon because it's reflecting the sun from where we're seeing it. So it's always opposite the sign that the sun is in. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We've got full moon in Taurus, but the sun is still in Scorpio. So those are on two opposite sides from each other astrologically. So this is creating dynamic tension in our daily life, right? Because they're opposite each other. It's like a tension. Squares, oppositions, those are dynamic tension in astrology. So we see the moon, that's our desires. It's our internal emotions. It's also the people, which is especially significant because this is falling right on the election day, and that's the voice of the people. But it's also our internal stuff that's going on. So we see the Scorpio sun, the sun's time of year. You can see it as the Kaliak, right? The old hag, the old woman. It's a woman with all of her knowledge and wisdom. Like, you have wisdom that comes from knowledge that you've really integrated, right? It's brought deep inside. So she's coming across the sea of time to her memories, her feelings, her plans and desires from her maiden time, her Beltane self back in Taurus. And there's a kind of melancholy to this, right? When you're looking back at your younger self, often there's a bit of melancholy. Someone getting older, thinking what they might say to their younger self, your Beltane self. In a lifetime, this happens sort of once, right? You get to be the maiden once, and then you get to be the old hag once. But in terms of the cycles of every year, we've got Beltane every May, and then we have Scorpio season every fall in like October, November. So we get to go through these cycles and go over these things. So with the stars, you've got these recurring cycles that they have a variation every time. They're not the same every year, right? We have variations on the themes. So when we come to spring, we'll begin our new lives again. It's almost like a different self. Like, you could think of your Scorpio self as your past lives, and your May self as your new lives. So we're kind of going over some of this because we've got the sun in Scorpio where we're reflecting, but the new moon is in Taurus where we're thinking about the seeds of what we're going to plant next Beltane next spring. But we're thinking about it now, especially since with the eclipses, the moon is connected to the north node. That's where we're moving forward. And the eclipse shadow is the reflective quality of our past season. So we can plan something quite new with that new moon in Scorpio that we had 2 weeks ago. We can start cycling into totally new things, but we had to let go of a lot of stuff from the past. So like the trees have shed most of their leaves. I hope you've been able to shed most of whatever you were looking to let go of from this past season, this past year. Still have time till tomorrow if you want to do that dark of the moon work to shed things. The difference between knowledge and wisdom is knowing that the wheel keeps turning, and you have to let go of those attachments and keep moving forward, right? I encourage you to go out. This is the doing part of this particular forecast. Go out and look at a shrub or tree that's been losing its leaves. They should, if you're in a northern area, if you're not like in South Florida or something, you should have trees that have let go of their leaves. And if you look closely at the branches, you can see the little leaf buds. That's where the old leaves have fallen off, the ones that aren't going to photosynthesize through the winter. So the tree's letting those go. It doesn't need those right now. But it's got the little tiny buds on the branches that are for next year, right? Those are the leaves that you're going to see next year. They're already on the tree. They're there in bud form. And they're going to wait through the entire winter already. They don't wait till spring to actually like begin those leaves. The genesis of them is already on the tree if you go out and look at those. So I invite you to go out and do that. You too are going to grow again. We have the season of looking within, but then we start our new projects. Well, they don't just start out of nowhere. We're already thinking about things, thinking about what we want to do after winter. If you have a new job, new projects, if you want to move, whatever it is you want to move forward with, probably already thinking about some of those things. So the last lunation at the new moon Scorpio encourages us to clean out our bats in the belfry, so to speak, right? And the last 2 weeks might have been kind of heavy, especially if you had planets in fixed signs. Scorpio is a fixed sign. That means where we really, well, it's kind of self-explanatory, I guess, where we're really attached to things, or water signs, which can be more emotional. Those could have been a little heavy, but we get our groove back with the Taurus new moon. The moon swept across Chiron on its way to this full moon, so it might have been a real process. Might have been hard to let go of some things, right? That things that we were attached to, or that have been our comfort zone, or that have sustained us for a while. People, relationships, jobs, places. It can be hard to let that stuff go, and it's taken us a long time to get to this point. This whole last 2 years have sort of been a preparation for what we're doing right now, where we're moving to. So there could be a little bit of melancholy with that, like I said before. Sun isn't doing this alone, though. The Sun in Scorpio. He's got Venus on one side, and he's got Mercury on the other side. So there could be some things that came out, some things that had to be said that might have come out a little sharper than you might have wanted to either say or hear. This is like a real like Venus and Scorpio moment, right? And the song that came up for me with this, because Pluto's kind of and Saturn also are like on the left side of the chart. If you pull up the chart and look at the chart, you can look at a natal chart, or I should say an astrology chart for particular times, just as you might look at a birth chart for yourself. This is like the birth chart of the full moon eclipse that you can look at. You see Pluto and Saturn on the left, and that song came up for me, Beyonce, Irreplaceable, to the left, everything you own on the side to the left. Like, that's all that stuff that's got to go. Like, and it's such a like Venus and Scorpio's song. She's like so centered in herself and so strong. Like, this breakup isn't going to break her. She's ready. Part of wisdom is knowing who we are, staying centered, confident, and hopeful. She can build something back. It's not the end of the world. She's like, I could have another you in a minute, right? So she's gonna build something new. She's not gonna sit down and break down. Uranus, the awakener, the lightning bearer, is conjunct the moon, the north node with the moon in Taurus. So the moon also has its support trio, because it's like there's the three with the sun. You've got that Venus, the sun, and the south node, and then you've got your three with the moon. You've got your Uranus and your moon and your north node. So that's also in a square to that Saturn. So there's a lot of emphasis on this, like working with the nodes is like Saturn in Aquarius. It's your long-term solid changes, because you got that Pluto connecting with that. That's more of a trine to the Uranus. So it's like you want to build something you're going to connect to. Don't build back something that you really don't want. And that's the part that's hard sometimes with that Uranus, it's like changing everything. You want to change to something you actually want to connect to. You want to use that North Node to build something you want, right? And you're seeing with Saturn, like, okay, what's solid? What long term is really going to go forward? So wouldn't be surprised if there was some shape shifting for the Earth signs and the Earth. There could be some earthquake, something. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like, because the thing with Uranus is it's a surprise. It happens all of a sudden. You can't really totally predict that. It's going to have something to do with the Earth, Earth signs, things being built, things being torn down, something like that. But we'll have to see what it is. And hopefully it'll be changes that just happen, but that are going to be things that are needed, things that are going to move things forward somehow, because with that Pluto, like I said, to Uranus, it's a trine. So it's something that's just going to go. So it's not a square or an opposition like we have with the Sun and Taurus. It's a trine, so hopefully it's things that just go. We may say some of this in hindsight, right? Because Mars is retrograde, and whatever we're doing, we're gonna think about, because it's Mars and Gemini, we're gonna think about, we might redo it, we might go backwards, we might go forwards. This is gonna go on till next March. Mars is in there for a while, so we may look back at this time and say, oh, that's when that started, whatever. So next March, yeah, we'll see the results of what we've been working on. That Mars is squaring Jupiter and Neptune in Pisces. So both Neptune and Pisces can be kind of dreamy. It's like the collective unconscious. So that's another reason why we may not really see the results of all this until Mars starts to get ready to go direct again. We might not realize the fallout. We might not sift through all the information. We might not see how big the changes are going to be right away till after everything happens. With this falling on election day, it could also be like a delay in the results. I've heard other astrologers say that. Please get out and vote, whichever side you're voting for, because they only give us two sides. That's part of what I don't like about voting. But the important thing is to exercise your right to vote. No matter which side of the equation you decide to fall on, get involved. You want to keep your right to vote. You want to keep some choices. And then if you don't like what you're being presented with to vote on, like you want more choices, get involved after the election. Start at a local level. That's probably the easiest way, unless you have a line into more national politics and you want to work on that, be my guest. But hopefully, work peacefully, but work towards what you want to see in the world. Working towards what you want, I think, is much better than fighting what you don't want. When we're all fighting, not a lot gets accomplished, except for the people behind the scenes who set this all up, right? There goes my little conspiracy theory thing. But if we're working peacefully towards what we want, I think we find we have more in common than we might realize once we take that arguing out of the equation. In Ayurvedic astrology, the moon's nodes are known as Ketu and Rahu. They are two dragons that eat the sun, but because it used to be one dragon that got chopped in half, that are not the sun. That's for solar eclipses. We're talking about lunar eclipse. So that moon goes through them because the dragon has been chopped in half. Been hearing people mention the dragons a lot. Dragon energy, and that's always what the eclipse is. You see that dragon energy, and I think that comes from the Ayurvedic astrology that sees it as the two dragons. So you can work with that energy if that appeals to you, if the dragons are working for you. That South Node portal opened at the new moon. That was K2. You can think about what that dragon helps you get rid of, like what is taking out of your comfort zone so that you'll be ready for this um, full moon, which is the Rahu dragon, will help you bring in. And often with those opening those doors of perception, with Rahu, like I said, it kind of, the moon goes through the dragon, so it can be hard to hold on to those insights that we have at that time. I'm kind of hoping that with that Mars in retrograde, we have a chance to integrate some of these new things. Mars is out of bounds. What that means is, from our perspective here on Earth, what we look at in astrology is everything, the constellations along the ecliptic. If you were to draw a line from the equator of the Earth going out into space, those would be the constellations that we're working with. And when a planet is kind of outside, it's my hand, I'm making hand gestures and they're outside the camera. This is sort of what I'm talking about, right? So that planet is outside of that ecliptic. It's kind of gone above or below it, and we say it's out of bounds. And so it can act kind of like a rogue planet now. It's doing things outside of the norm, outside of where it's usually contained. So we can think about, because Mars is in Gemini, we can think about all these changes we're making, and we can make some realizations outside the box, especially with that North Node kind of giving us that light bulb of inspiration. And I hope we're able to integrate that a little better. And we want to kind of work with some optimism, right? Because there's a lot of heavy energy. So if we can work with some of that, we're going into Sagittarius season, the season of light. They call Sagittarius. So if we can keep some of that optimism, we can start that with our new perceptions coming out of Taurus at the full moon, or we're thinking about the new season coming up in the spring when Mars goes direct and we start acting on things again. So if you want to work with our stone friends and you want to work with the dragon energy, you could work with ruby or obsidian. These also work well with Scorpio, which we're still in our Scorpio sun season. Ruby and obsidian are associated with dragons because they come from deep in the earth and they have those dark, rich colors. And so you could work with those crystals and meditate with them and see what that brings up for you and how that works with your goals. For that Taurus optimism, I would suggest working with rose quartz. Rose quartz is always a very generous and happy relationship type stone, and can help us find common ground and work on new relationships that we want to bring into our lives with our new intentions that we're setting. Our plant friends for this lunation, what I came up with, I've been working a lot with apple energy lately. If you're on my Patreon, you see I posted some talk about the mythology of apples, and how that kind of relates to what I was talking at the beginning of the forecast, is that apples in folk stories, they are often associated with both the young maiden. You always see this young maiden getting this apple, and she gets it from an old hag. Well, in the older versions of these stories, that Kaliak, that hag energy, that would have been the matriarch, that would have been the older woman initiating the younger woman into the mysteries of life, and that apple is a symbol for giving that. Now with the patriarchy, they've turned that into a bad thing where it's a poison apple, but the girl doesn't die, but she gets awakened by, of course, the young prince who comes to save her, because it has to become patriarchal. But in the older versions of those stories, that was often an older woman, the Kaliak type woman, the hag, the old witch, would have been an older, wiser woman who was initiating the younger woman into the mysteries of life, because she has the wisdom to know how to handle all the things that come up as you go through maidenhood and you get married and you are mating, going into that family area of life. And so I'm going to leave you with that you can think about that when you're eating apples next time. Apples ripen at the Samhain time of year, at the Halloween time of year in October. People would leave them as gifts for the dead to nourish them in the afterlife, sort of in the way that you see Day of the Dead in Mexico, where they honor the ancestors. They had that tradition in the European tradition also, and it's natural that these things would happen at the time of the year when the growth season is winding down, and we're thinking about people have gone before us, and it's a sort of natural cycle that's common in so many cultures of the world. So if you enjoy these forecasts and you get something out of them, please like and subscribe below, or share them to your friends who you think might also enjoy it. And I wish you a peaceful, if somewhat eventful, full moon, and we'll see next time. We can kind of go over what might have happened from this. All right, take care, y'all, and see you next time.